Are you good, Iris? All right, she's good. She's like my co-host. She's always in this room whenever I do this stuff. So I'll just start. Hey everybody, it's Bill from Matt-Trakker.com, and on this episode of Behind the Mask, I'm joined by one of my long-lost mask agent friends, Erik from BoulderHill.net. Erik, how you doing?
I'm good, Bill. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's always hard with us. I know whenever we did the chats with Jason and Wyatt of Agents of M.A.S.K, there's always that huge gap in the time. And, you know, with you being on the West Coast and most of us on the East Coast, it always made it hard. So I always found myself dragging along and like this when we were doing the chats. But yeah, I'm glad we were able to get together on a Sunday to be able to, you know, talk a little M.A.S.K, and not just M.A.S.K itself, but IDW's take on M.A.S.K. You know, not many people know that IDW, and you know, the funny thing is, before we get into it, when IDW first announced this, I didn't know what IDW was. That's me being completely honest, because I wasn't big into comics itself. So I was surprised and happy that you know what was going to happen with this. IDW launched their own shared universe and tied in a lot of 80s entities like Transformers, G.I. Joe, M.A.S.K, ROM, and I think a few other things were thrown in there too. And eventually it led into M.A.S.K getting its own comic series. Now, before we talk about it a little bit in depth, Erik, you got to meet basically the brains behind this and get an autograph for not only myself but the Agents of M.A.S.K as well, which is awesome that you did that. Talk a little bit about your encounter with Brandon.
So I've actually run into Brandon a couple times. Just he's LA based, as am I. He lives in, I want to say, Long Beach, but I could be wrong about that. I know he lives like farther south from me, so I don't see him frequently, but I do get to bump into him at conventions and events periodically if I've got the time to go down to them. So when the first issue was announced for a release, he also, Brandon, announced that he would be doing a kind of release day signing at a comic book store down in Culver City, which is down in like Southwest LA, I guess you'd kind of call it. For people who don't know, it's not really that relevant, but no, while not like incredibly close, it was definitely something I could get down to. So, you know, I made it a point to go down there and I kind of introduced myself, talked to him a little bit about, yeah, there's the cover number for the Revolution. Yeah. Hey, there's the signature. There it is.
Oh, I can actually get it on the screen here. I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just throwing some.
No. It's such a cool cover. So, I mean, yeah, that's a good interruption.
I'll keep it up for a minute here.
So, yeah, I was able to get down there, talk to him for a while. I was able to get there. Comics, for people who don't know, typically come out on a Wednesday. And so if you're doing a release or a signing at a comic book store right when they open up or right when, you know, in that part of the day, you know, you're probably looking at like a 10 or 11 a.m. on a Wednesday. And so the crowd isn't usually quite as big right then. You know, you get a lot of people start coming by at 5 or 6, you know, after work. So because of that, though, that was fortunate for me. It meant I got to sort of steal his time while I was there for a minute. It wasn't busy right away, so I was able to just chat with him, and he was very nice and really happy to talk about things and his concept for, you know, where the story was going. At the time, he was hoping, I know, it would go longer. Obviously, the M.A.S.K comic didn't get to continue for as long as a lot of us would have hoped. He said he had several story arcs. I don't know if scripted is the right word, but, you know, outlined at least general ideas of what he'd like to do with it. And he seemed really excited at the time. I think he was still excited working on it, but like anything in a business versus creativity, if the sales numbers and the dollars aren't there, things wrap up. So I think that's kind of just why it wrapped up at the end there. Yeah, that's probably most of what was going on that first day. But he was really nice. He was happy to sign a bunch of stuff. I was able to pick up um, several copies of the issues. I gave away some on my website at the time that it was releasing. So that was really fun. Uh, I don't know. The comic has a lot of mixed reactions, as I know you know, Bill. Some people really liked it. Some people really hated it. There's some people who are in the middle. There are some people who really like certain aspects but really disliked other aspects of it. And no, I think most of those opinions are valid. You can totally feel how you want to feel about something. As a general rule, I enjoyed the comics. I will probably be in the group that says like I liked most of it, but there are things that I wish were a little different. So, I'm happy to talk some more about that, but figure
That's
that wraps up my first visit.
that's all the time we have today. So thank you, Eric.
Uh,
Yeah, just kidding. No, you're right though, and obviously we'll talk about it a little bit more. But I remember, I mean, when I saw this first part on the Revolution, I saw, and I saw the concepts for the character design, which I'll magically float here in my hands once I put it in edit. Um, I saw the original character designs, and I was like, oh, they look cool. And then when I saw the cover, I was a little confused because is it new or old?
yeah,
And obviously, they kind of intertwine a little bit here and there between the old and the new. They poke fun at the old with some of the new. A lot of the covers draw back to the old. Um, there's all kinds of stuff like that, and obviously, you can't please everybody. But what is it? What is it that you think? I mean, I think the series ran for 10 books on its own.
hmm
And then I think there were, I don't remember how involved they were in the revolution portion of it, but they were in a couple of those books as well. What is it about? Well, first, let's start with the positive. What is it about the comic adaptation that you liked? Let's start there.
Okay. Yeah, so there were 10 issues of the regular series, and there was also the annual, which was
That's
the
yes, that's it.
kind of the double length issue. Um,
I have it
so
somewhere.
the things that I liked, I will say that I really liked the visual presentation of everything. Um, some of the people who I would say I disagree with more were the ones who are like, I can't believe they changed the look of anything. It was like, well, 30 years later, 35 years later, uh, we're not going to have the exact same vehicles rolling around on the street, right? That's just going to be a little ridiculous.
Yeah, and
Uh,
here's while you're talking, here's the first cover, and I'll post a better picture of it on the video, but just to show for,
mhm.
this is what I was kind of just saying, like, hey, look, they pull back from the classics, um, but they also know that they also know the target audiences.
Right. And so, I mean, part of the thing is that the covers for the first issues, at least, were probably drawn. I mean, I know they're drawn in advance, right? Because they have to get all these pieces rolling at once. They can't wait. So the cover artist was drawing without all of the information about what the changes that were going to come into
Hmm?
things were going to be. Now that being said, they're cool. They're very much more of a original mask look. But yeah, so that interior page you're just showing right there, I think that's a great example of what the updated book looked like. I thought the layouts and the art were really cool, especially that kind of overlay in the bottom right of those pages that you had there. I don't. I found the layout and the storytelling to be really dynamic. Um, for people who haven't read the original Mask comics, I think that they are. I think they've got some unfair criticism sometimes when you're considering, if you look at those original Mask comics, they're pretty cheesy. The dialogue is really, really stiff when we're talking about the DC comics from the 80s or some of the Eagle and British comics. So to see some of the criticism of that, it's like, this was not a cartoon, right? We weren't getting Mask, the new animated series. We're getting Mask, the new comic book. And I think there was a lot of unfair criticism on that end right there.
Here's Mask
I
One,
thought,
the old version. Here's the new Mask One. Like, there you go.
right, yeah. So I think the artwork was really cool. I liked the stories. I think that one of the things that hurt the Mask comics the most was Revolution, unfortunately. I don't think that it allowed Mask to be as much of its own thing as it wanted to be, and forced it to include more of these Transformers and G.I. Joe elements, which I'm a fan of Transformers and G.I. Joe, right? I mean, anyone who grew up liking Mask was bound to watch some Transformers and some G.I. Joe. And I don't have any problem with those franchises, but those are bigger franchises, right? Those are bigger worlds, or whatever you want to call them. They're much bigger. Just looking at the staying popularity, and that's cool. Mask is what it is, and I love it, and there's nothing wrong with it. But when you bring in both G.I. Joe and Transformers heavily on top of it, I think what happens is Mask starts to get diluted.
No, you're not wrong.
Uh,
You're not wrong on that.
so I think that hurt it. One of the things I really liked that Brandon did, though, is he made a smart decision to only use a handful of agents.
Yeah.
Knowing that it's a comic book versus a cartoon series. In the cartoon series, you had so many different agents, right? Like, by the end of the series, there was probably 20 Mask agents. I don't know the number offhand, but it's a lot.
As you talk, I'll count up here.
Yeah, right. Start count. I mean, we kind of know there's like the 8 core agents from the original series, but then you have all those guys who showed up a little less frequently, like, I don't know, Julio Lopez. He didn't show up that much in the cartoon, but he's in the comic here. So Brandon made a good choice to just pick a handful, and I think that let him develop their characters a bit more. Developing their characters does kind of bring up one of the things that people had as a sore spot, was he changed Matt's personality significantly. Matt went from being, oh,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it was as much personality as it was race that people were upset about. But that's a topic we can dig into. But you're not wrong on that, because Matt, he's Bruce Wayne with blonde hair.
yeah, I mean, he changed. Yeah, definitely there were people who were like, why is Matt now African American? Which to me was like the least relevant question personally. I don't think that his ethnic background really ever impacted his character in the cartoon, and I don't think it impacted it here. But what he changed in the comic book was, in the series, Matt is an established, very confident businessman slash, the secret hero in the cartoon, right? Like, he's clearly, like, he's a mover and a shaker in the political and the business world, right? Like, he's just got money for days because he just funds Mask, apparently. We don't even know, all he's ever described as a philanthropist, and we're like, okay, so you invest and you have enough to have a side hobby as a superhero. That's awesome. You are Batman. But we don't really know what he does. But we do always see that Matt has tons of confidence as a leader.
Yeah.
And Matt in this new comic book series doesn't start there. This is Matt 5 years before, or 10 years before that, right? Like, kind of earning his confidence, earning his expertise, which we never saw in the cartoon. He just kind of had it already, right? He came in that way.
Hey, he's
And
right there, ready to go.
I don't think that that's a bad story, but I think some of the audience members looking at the comic weren't ready for that story, or weren't looking for that story. They wanted more nostalgia. They just wanted Mask They wanted 1985 Mask to just pick up 31 years later. Is that the right math? 2016? 31. I think that's my math. I'm going to stick with it.
Yeah, let's go with
31
that.
years.
Yeah.
They just wanted it to pick up right where it was. And I think that's a naive expectation to have had, unfortunately. So the people whose comments and complaints were that it's not like the original, and there was a lot of that, right? When the series was, oh, it's not like Mask used to be. This isn't the Mask I grew up with. I was like, well, it could be the Mask your kids grow up with. I don't know. It's 31 years later, right? Like,
Yeah.
we could change some stuff. I didn't have the internet when Mask was coming out, and I have that now. So change isn't bad necessarily. So there was that aspect of it. I will say one of the issues I really liked, and Brandon didn't actually write this one, was the annual. Um, and this one actually did have a lot of nostalgia. I don't know how much you've looked through the annual, but if you go through it, it's actually got tons of callbacks to the original series, specifically the first episode, the Death Stone.
Mm-hmm.
The very first page of the annual is, in fact, obviously it's not animated, but it is hand-drawn shots that mirror the opening of the Death Stone, which is that comet or the meteor, right? They call it a meteor, right? So it's a
Yeah.
meteor crashing into Earth, and then some of the dialogue in the comic is literally word for word taken from the first episode of Mask. So I liked that. I felt like that was a cool way to give nods to the original material in the annual. But at the same time, how much of that can you do before it just becomes this rehash? And does that play into new fans? And I have really no ability to speak as someone who would be a new fan, right? I've been a fan for 30 years. So I don't know. I don't know if that was not appealing to new people.
Part of my thinking of it all, and you kind of touched on it a little bit in the talking of, what you just brought up. So as I said, my tagline of the website is keeping Mask alive since 2001. It's a weird tagline, but it's the only thing I could think of at the time when I made it. And it's stuck. So for me, I've been hoping and praying and waiting, and we got this guy, he came out a little while ago, and I was thinking, hey, something's happening. Nothing forever. And then we started hearing about the M.A.S.K comic coming out, and I was excited. And I remember, and it just haunts me. I just remember the initial reaction of the fans when I was posting this stuff, like, hey, here comes the comic, here's this. And when it was revealed that Matt was African American, I had posts that I had to delete because people were just being completely insensitive and not open to the fact that, hey, as you said, it's 31 years later, or however how long ago it was. It's not all going to be the same, and times change. I mean,
Yep.
Adam West's Batman isn't going to translate on TV today or in the movies today. You have to adapt to the times of what you're working with, and what you touched on too, with it kind of being lost with G.I. Joe and Transformers. The whole concept of the comic is Mayhem creates this agency to fight the Transformers. It's a cool concept, but it doesn't hold its own, and it kind of deviates a little bit. And as you said, Matt is nowhere near where where we think of him as, this Matt right here. This isn't the Matt we're thinking of. We're thinking of, I mean, as sad as it is to say, it can almost be here. Like, you're going that far back.
Sure.
Just obviously it's not that drastic, but they're recruits under Mayhem's. I forget exactly what terminology they use, but it's like a black ops team to
Right.
combat the Transformers. So it's a cool concept on paper, but it it gets lost in that aspect when it in the Revolution comic. It gets lost when
Yeah.
when
It
it does make it to its own comic version, though. It does pick up. Um, Maybe not where people want, where, as you said, hey, it's 30 some years later, hey, where's Matt? Let's get the Thunderhawk out of storage and let's go. It's not the same thing. Um, and it was never billed that way either. It was never saying, they never said we're picking up where we left off, because it's different writers, different people producing this. It's not the same thing. Um, would people have jumped onto it a little better if everything stayed exactly the same? Probably. Um,
I don't think it would have lasted though.
it
I,
might
I
not
don't
have.
think that
Not
people
in this
wanted.
form. Not in a comic form, I don't think. I think I appreciate what was done, but it doesn't. The comics, no matter what they are, unless you're Batman or Superman, they don't have that staying power, um, to sustain. And I mean, in my opinion, that's just me. And if it if the comics spiraled to something else, animated series, a new toy line, which we almost got based off of the Matt-Trakker in the series.
Mhm.
We got this out of the San Diego Comic-Con set. If it only mutated into something else, I think it really would have had some longevity. But in its form, it like you said, I think it was 10, and it had some, had the annuals and things like that. If it just had that mutation to take the next step into a medium that us, as the children of the 80s, were familiar with, I think it would have had a little bit more staying power. And I think that the differences from the first iteration of M.A.S.K to this iteration of M.A.S.K wouldn't have been as prevalent if it made that transition. That's just my
Yeah,
thing.
you mentioned the Matt-Trakker that came out of the San Diego Comic Con toy set, and I think it's important to point out that that was part of a set that came with a
Yes.
whole bunch of Revolution properties, and it came up with a bunch of other 80s properties that, like, let's be honest here, Hasbro and whatever, they were using this as a test. They wanted to see, at this point in time, are these franchises that will make us money? And let's not have illusions here that this is a business making money. And one of the ones that also got a very similar amount of treatment was Visionaries, which a lot of us probably at least remember. If you're bothering to listen to a M.A.S.K podcast or watch a M.A.S.K video, you're probably familiar with Visionaries. Um, the set from San Diego Comic Con had a single Visionaries figure. They put out a handful of Visionaries comics that were fun again. They were updated though, and they wrapped up when the money wasn't there.
Yeah.
That's, I feel like it's important to kind of just at least acknowledge that these comics and these cartoons. Oops, sorry about the beeps. It's important to recognize that these things are made by a company, right? Like, it's a business. As much as we have these huge fond memories, at the end of the day, 30 years ago, it was Deke and whoever producing these cartoons to make money. And you have to, like, you can't look at it in you can't look at it in a bubble where you forget that it's created by a business.
Mhm.
So, I,
Yeah,
know,
you're right.
the negative stuff aside, there was some stuff I really liked about the comics, and I think visually, the visuals to me were probably what really I loved. Mask was always a very strong visual show to me. Every character was distinct. The vehicles obviously were extremely distinct and memorable. Uh, it the vehicles sometimes were more distinct than their characters, than their drivers, and I really liked the takes on the character designs. Like the characters themselves. It's funny to me. Mask was never about the character, but it was about their battle suit or whatever you want to call it, right? Like I don't think of Matt as a white guy in a business suit. I think of Matt as a guy in a gray with red trim sort of pilot outfit. That's what Matt looks like to me. I don't care who's under the helmet. I don't even think about Matt's face. I'm always sitting here going, put on your mask and let's go fight. Like, right? Nobody was sitting here going, boy, I really want to watch Matt in the boardroom negotiating a deal. That wasn't Mask.
Talking with Dwayne Kennedy. That'd be fun.
Right. Like as a kid, I remember I'm like, oh man, hurry up, finish talking to Dwayne so you can assemble the Mask team. I'm just sitting there like biting my nails waiting for the call up. I'm not waiting for him to call Dwayne Kennedy, this old guy with a mustache, sitting on the screen going like, oh no, we've got another problem. Like, yeah, of course there's a problem. It's Mask. That's what we're here for.
I'll
And
solve
so
it for you. Yeah, he'll fix it. No worries, no worries.
but I thought that the updated suits really felt updated while still having really great respect, I guess I would call it, to the original stylings. So, looking at like Cliff Dagger, I think is probably a great one. Like he didn't need as much updating, but what they did was they made his mask even more of just like this big chunk of iron on his head, which was really cool.
Yeah,
One that got
felt like more like the Juggernaut, I think.
yes, or the old Iron Man suit, which
Yeah,
was this big hulking metal thing.
the Mark
So
One.
his suit kind of stayed, and his look stayed the same. But then if you looked at someone like Brad, his suit updated more, I would say. Brad's became what you'd expect kind of to see. I would think of as like a mix between a modern day motorcycle rider mixed with I don't know, like a future tactical warrior kind of suit, which made sense for the fact that they're, like you said, supposed to be kind of a black ops thing. But they kept it really true by keeping those colors, right? Like Brad had that signature bumblebee yellow
Mhm.
with purple detailing. So even 30 years later, even with changes, you could open that book, look at any page with him in that suit and be like, oh, that's got to be Brad Turner, right? And it would be, yes, it's him. So I think that a lot of the visuals and stuff were actually everything that I really could have expected from a updated version of Mask.
Yeah, you talked earlier about having like a shorter roster, which I liked. And the one thing I really liked is not having this little bastard anywhere, because it wouldn't fit in this comic. And I remember seeing some quotes from Brandon about nope, no T-Bob, something along those lines. I was happy to see that because it wouldn't have fit. Like here's an opening page. Just look at the look on Miles Mayhem's face right there, and just
Yep.
kind of like look at the intensity that's going on here. It just doesn't fit unless she's coming in as a tactical weapon. It doesn't really work. So I was happy to see that. And what I'm doing is I'm just kind of like I'm flipping through the pages as we talk, and yeah, like I'm looking at the team here. Like they're not in their uniforms, and they're doing what they're doing. They're planning for the next way to get out of whatever trouble they're in. And what we come up to here is this really intense scene here. I mean, right here, there's Bruno and Matt fighting. Like
Oh yeah.
it's it's not the same. But as you said, you see the gray and the red, and you see the leader of M.A.S.K, right? you
Yep.
know, you see the yellow, you see, oh, that's Brad Turner. You see the palish greenish color, or the, I don't know what color that is, grayish green for Julio.
Pistachio.
Yeah, and that's Julio, and the same thing for Gloria. Except if you were going by the toys, we wouldn't know who it is because they didn't make that. Um,
Hey, wait a minute. That's a different topic.
yeah, it is. But let me here. Look at this. Look at this right here. Matt, like, let's see if I can get it in the screen here. Oh, look at that. Bruno's like choking him down, and there's like, you don't see this in, you're not going to see this in what we had. It, the interpretation had to change, and you had to modernize it.
Well, if you go back to that double page that you showed earlier, it's about 5 pages into the first issue.
Mhm.
You'll see Matt. He's like training with Brad, Julio, and Gloria, and I would argue that if you took that to somebody who had no idea there was an updated comic, just showed him this and said, someone who knew Mask and said, who are those characters? They'll go, well, that's Matt, and that's Gloria on the left, and that looks like Brad in the back, and that looks like Julio on the right. And to me, that means you did it right. You did a good job remembering where the story came from.
Yeah.
And another thing I want to mention, because I feel like I didn't get to talk about the things I liked about the writing as much. I've mentioned the visuals.
Oh, good. Yeah.
In the original Mask run, there was this established story kind of in the comics that Mayhem originally worked with Matt's brother developing Mask, and then he betrayed him and ran off with the technology, and Matt's brother died. Matt had a brother named Andy. This is only in the comics, does not exist as part of the story in the cartoon. In the cartoon, Miles doesn't know who Matt is. There's a whole episode about that, right? Where he gets he can start to see through objects, and he finds out who the leader of M.A.S.K is. He finds out it's Matt-Trakker. And then, of course, there's like a terrible MacGuffin, and he forgets everything. But in this one, the stakes are much higher, and the personal involvement is much stronger because they start out as a group together, and then Matt and the M.A.S.K agents essentially get betrayed by Miles.
Yes.
And to me, that's really strong storytelling. Like you don't have to explain to me at that point why Matt is super invested at this point. Like, are you kidding? The guy he saw as his father figure, it turns out, has kind of been playing him for a while, and then just 180s and betrays him. Of course he's invested in that. And then on top of that, did anyone ever wonder why the 80s version of Mask, Matt recruited from the world's like worst job search ever? He's like, well, I could really use a veterinarian, so I'll get that guy. And I can't think of anyone better to be a secret agent than a rock star. He's probably always free and always on, location.
Don't forget Dusty making pizzas.
Right. Yeah.
Go.
Nothing wrong with being a guy who makes pizzas. I love pizza. I would like to discuss, though, maybe where you think that the skills that are good as a pizza maker transitioned into being a secret agent. And so those were always things that we just accepted when we were watching it as kids. I think Brandon said, wait a minute, this guy cannot be a pizza parlor guy. Like, this is really dumb. It doesn't work. So what did he do? He made them all these secret special forces agents, which gave them a background that actually made sense to why they have combat skills and piloting skills and weaponry skills. And looking back, it only sold in the 80s because I was a kid. Nowadays, if you were like, yeah, this pizza parlor guy puts on a mask and he drives a boat, I'm like, well, wait, but he's also a cowboy. Like if you look at Dusty Hayes' story, like he's a hot mess. He is a rodeo loving, kind of redneck character who works at a pizza parlor or owns it. It's very vague. But then he's also a secret agent. Like none of his things line up.
The only one that ever lined up was Ace because he was a fighter pilot. Like
Yeah, he
that was
was a pilot. That's right. I
that
mean,
was it.
Gloria's original story is amazing too, right? Gloria is both a champion
Uh,
judo or
Jiu-jitsu, I think.
yeah, she's a champion martial artist
Mhm.
and hold on, her profession, race car driver.
Yes, but she's always playing second fiddle, and
Yeah,
always riding shotgun in Gator or Thunderhawk.
yeah.
So I already talked about this before. How upset I am at the fact that Kenner and the M.A.S.K creative team just bypassed her completely. But yeah, it's funny. Like, hey, there's Julio Lopez. He's a doctor and he can fly a dune buggy. You remember that in med school? So,
That's right. That's the third year is when you learn how to fly dune buggies.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it's funny when you do think about it that way. Um,
yeah, and the original Mask, looking back on it, obviously had some biases and some stereotypes going on there.
yeah,
But that being said, it definitely, at least there were some parts of it that made efforts to be more inclusive.
yeah, it acknowledged.
Just by having a more diverse roster of agents that showed up. Now that being said, there's only one female, and there's most of the agents are of Caucasian background, but not all of them, which was cool. Julio Lopez was a doctor. That's cool. Like that's I'm not I am Caucasian, so I had lots of easy role models. So yeah, but I imagine that was like a cool thing as a kid of a different background. Be like, oh wow, like there's a hero on this show today that I can empathize with more. Hondo was in tons of episodes, and Hondo was pretty cool. We don't know why he was a tactical strategist. He was always described as such, but as a profession, he was a professor or a teacher.
It was a
Uh,
history teacher, yeah.
yeah, so I mean, I think I always in my head tried to assume that he was like a war historian, and that's why he's a tactical strategist. I'm like, that right? That'll work in my head. Um,
Man, you're right though. I mean, I just grabbed a few here. Like, and
yeah.
these
Oh, that one in the middle though. Those two in the middle. It's not. Oh,
these two.
Ali, and Chief Nevada Rushmore is probably not the most sensitive and
But
best depiction.
the fact that they included it, like, it's not like they did it out of comedy, or like it's not like they were trying to poke fun at the Native American.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think the representation isn't great, but yes,
Yeah, I mean, I just don't know how else you would go with them, but I always appreciated the fact it. I mean, it stinks that it was mostly in season two when it kind of felt like that.
yeah.
But I mean, I just always hated Ali. Um, it has nothing to do with anything. I just hated the character. um,
Sure.
um, and
I couldn't stand Jacques just because his accent was so bad. It was like they found someone who had once met a French guy once, and then they said, "You're French Canadian," and he's like, "Well, I don't know what that sounds like, but I once met a French guy." So it was like, "Oh,
ate French fries once. I can do that voice, sure, no problem. Let me get on that.
yeah."
No, but you're right though. Um, I mean, Venom's side didn't have that diversity. Vanessa was there, but um, in
But
the
to be
comics,
fair, though, Vanessa is like one of the strongest female characters ever.
she is.
She took nothing. She took nothing from any of the guys. She
Yeah.
was happy to throw down with Dagger or Rax.
Mhm.
She would challenge Mayhem whenever she, you know, felt like it. She's like, no. She was the only other person who Mayhem would let pilot Switchblade. Like, as much as they really did, as you said, just like shove Gloria into the background, they managed to make Vanessa awesome. And she's one of my favorite characters because
She's a lot of she's a
she's
lot of people. Yeah.
she's got so much spunk and personality, and she's just this strong female. And yeah, she's a villain, okay, but like she's out there kicking butt. You know, she's smart, she's clever, and strong. She was not in any way a like a I thought she was always a very three-dimensional character in the show.
You know what I always wanted to see, and I don't remember if I don't think it was an episode. I always wanted to see an episode where a Venom agent had to work with a M.A.S.K agent in order to get out of a situation together. You know, that dynamic that happens. I always thought that Vanessa would work
Season
well.
2 a little bit.
Well, I mean, yeah, a little bit, but for the first season when M.A.S.K was M.A.S.K and not the racing series,
Right.
I always wanted to see something along those lines where, you know, like they get, you know, let's say they're in a, you know, let's say that Matt and Vanessa are in a dogfight with their vehicles, and they both hit each other at the same time, and they go down on a deserted island. They have to find a way off it together. Like I always thought that would be like a cool premise, but it never happened. And it's not because of bad writing or anything like that. It just wasn't a story arc that was ever presented. I always wanted to see something like that. I remember the one episode, I think it was the very last one or second to last, when Miles and Matt shook hands. I have a picture of it posted on the Facebook page. You know, like you finally saw the two getting over all the crap that they went through, and kind of somewhat patch things up.
Sure.
You know, there's so many interesting personalities and characters. I mean, not Dagger. Dagger's as dumb as a doorknob, but
Hey, we love him for it, though.
no, but like, you know, he couldn't really have much of a story arc out of anything. You know, you know, Rax would have been interesting to find out how he got his mustache. As stupid as that sounds, like where did that come from? And there's all kinds of stories that we could have had, but I mean, I'm looking at every time I do one of these videos, I look over at my figure shop that's right here, and I go, damn, that's a lot of story. There's so many characters, and that's one of the good things that the comic did was, and you said it earlier, is condense it to, I think, 4 on each side. So it was Matt, Julio, Brad, and Gloria. And then on the other side, it was Vanessa, Bruno. It was 5 on the other side. It was Vanessa, Sly, Dagger, Bruno, and Mayhem.
Right.
So I don't remember if there's anybody else.
I think that was it. I mean, you had some of the other drop-ins and stuff, but
sure. But yeah, it would, you know, I don't know.
Yeah, and that was a great storytelling choice in my opinion, because if you tried to put 8 agents on each side, there would be no development. They would just be cartoon cutouts. And, you know, talking about how they weren't so great to Gloria in the original series, the cover to issue 3 well, there you go. If you got issue 3 and yeah.
Got it right here. Hold on, because I was gonna bring that up. Here, I'm getting there. There it is.
I beat you to it. Like, that is so cool. Like,
that's just, I think, if I remember correctly, I think this was the regular cover. If you open it up, this is like the subscription cover or the artist rendition. This is Gloria on comic 3, and also too, I mean, you know, right in the back there, and obviously they saved the best for comic 3 there. You know, sorry, I had to plug it in there, but not every day.
What's that little icon I'm noticing, Bill?
I don't know what it is. I don't know. But no, like, it's like you said, they pay homage to her. Like, they actually, hey, look, it's Shark. And real quick, I saw it when I was going through them earlier. Hold on. On one of the covers, Stiletto is there for Gloria. I didn't notice this when I first saw it. And I said, what the hell? There it is. Right there. Stiletto
in the background.
And Gloria. And at first, you don't recognize it. You don't see it. But Stiletto is not her vehicle. That's another episode. And I like it's just funny. Like Jason and I were talking about it a couple episodes ago, uh, where she drives around Sly's mask. I don't know.
Right.
That cover there. I mean, and to kind of go, we could talk about these covers all day.
Sure.
So many of them, and as the series prolonged, they became less and less. But the comic book 2 out of the series are some of the best covers I have ever seen developed for anything comic wise. And just trying to get to them here real quick. I got them all out of order.
Oh, cover 2 is the Back to the Future pose.
Well, you have
right.
you
And
have
that
this one
cover's
here.
beautiful.
So you have this one here.
Oh, okay. The agents one. Yeah, I'm thinking of that's the one of the variants. I think the regular cover though, to me,
Yeah, I got it here somewhere. Yep, right here.
Is just like it's just gorgeous. You've got so much stuff in there. You've got the headshots in the background. You've got we never really got a name for it, but the Energizer coming down for the masks, and
And
then
I
you've
think
got
the regular ones were Tommy Lee Edwards, correct? I believe.
yeah, he did the regular covers for I think the first 4 or 5. I'd have to check exactly when he wrapped up, but and then you've just got Matt, and there's something about his like pose and posture where he doesn't look he looks just resigned. I don't know. He looks so serious in that pose. He's like, this is just the job that has to be done. And I don't know. This cover to me was like the most exciting thing.
You know what it reminds me of? Like you take a look at like a presidential portrait, and
Mm-hmm.
you can just see the resolve in the face of the president. Like that's what I see here. I don't see like obviously you look at it and you see Back to the Future, but I just see the resolve, as you just said. Like there's something about the pose. He's like, all right, let's go get it. Let's go do it. And I always thought that was awesome. But like the series 2 covers, I think some of my favorite. I'm gonna try to get close here so I can get them all in at once.
Mm-hmm.
Here's some of the variants here.
A little blurry, but yes.
I'll probably end up posting them up, as I edit the video on the cover. Yeah, it's just like there's so many cool ones. And do you have a favorite one? Do you remember?
Man, I mean, it's really hard to say exactly which would be my favorite just because there's things about each of them that I really love. Probably issue 2, the irregular one the one we're just looking at to me is probably my favorite cover, but I also really liked I think it's 4. Oh, I'm sorry, it's 5. 5 is the one where you've got Vanessa and Rax hanging out, and there's just this like neon sunset and the style, like it's kind of like a watercolor painting. I don't know what you want to call that there, but
I'll post a better picture of it, but I do have it. I
yeah,
just don't have it out. That's the one you're talking about there. So.
yeah, and that's the one. And then there's also there's that issue that looks like it was an action figure bubble for action figure card of Matt's action figure.
I think that was the
Uh,
Revolution one.
You're right. I think that was one of Revolution's variant covers, but to me, there it is. Yeah, that's so fun to me, and it's got the Micronauts, which not a thing for me, but it was just such a cool thing to do to like make
Thinking of
it,
Mayhem too. Yeah.
yes, but just for them to kind of be like, look, we know these were toys too. So I love that. But issue 2 or issue 5, those are my favorite covers.
So this one here is my favorite, and I'll talk about it in a second. It's pretty basic in terms of some of the other ones, but what we have old Thunderhawk. To get it in better shot
Mm-hmm.
here with the Matt-Trakker of the comic, and to take the two, combine them, you're bridging the gap, right? So
Yeah.
this could easily still be in use today if they took care of it 35 years later, wherever the hell it is. And like it's just so simplistic, but for me, it stands out the most. And you only had maybe Bruce and maybe Gloria pilot, Thunderhawk outside of Matt. But that
Sure.
one there, like it itself, like I don't know what it is. It's just something about it being the Thunderhawk and the new Matt-Trakker being together. And so they poke fun at some of the older vehicles sometimes in the comic. I forget which ones they are, but like they look at them and like look at that junk or something along those lines to recognize the past. But seeing the two together, like in that moment, it just kind of tied it together for me. So that was always my favorite one. What did you I don't know the story behind this, but so they have a different M.A.S.K logo here, and I'll post everybody knows what the M.A.S.K logo looks like, but I'll post it here alongside. Here I'm holding it up right here. There it is. You can't see it right now, but the people watching will be able to. So they
No
kind of
problem.
took it, they took out the Rhino and they just kind of stripped it down. What were your thoughts on them not using the original logo and using something different? Was there a reason behind it that you knew of, or do you think it was just a creative choice?
I think it was probably a couple of things. One, the original M.A.S.K logo is really big and takes up a lot of space.
It does.
Also, Rhino's not in the new comics, so having him on top of the word mask might be confusing to new audience members if they're trying to bring in some new readers.
Like, there's the old.
I love Rhino, no problem with it. But Rhino's not in this comic. I thought that the logo, honestly, like the fact that it was changed was kind of a zero impact on me. They kept the old lettering.
Yeah.
They kept that Ultra Flash head at the bottom, to me, which was obviously still a very strong original M.A.S.K imagery to bring into it. I liked it. I thought it popped a little bit, maybe better than if it had Rhino, because you had Rhino, you're gonna have to shrink the text down. It's gonna be in the middle. This way, you got M.A.S.K right across the top. Like,
yeah, if you have Rhino, this logo is either going to be like this big,
yep,
going to come down to like here.
yeah, and that's not effective. It was effective in the cartoon because when you showed the logo, it was usually a big splash shot
Yeah.
at the end of the opening scene, or then in the credits or something like that, and it's fine.
Yep.
But in comics and cartoons, while there's lots of overlap, they're different mediums, and you if you don't acknowledge that and you just try to straight up lift one and put it in the other, you're gonna end up with a product that like isn't very good.
Yeah, I mean you have to plan for the medium. You can't take some certain fonts don't translate from web to video, and they don't translate from print to web, and there's all kinds of things you have to take into account. I personally didn't mind it. I wasn't sure what to expect because when they first came out, it was just Revolution, and they had the abbreviation there.
Right. That's actually a great cover, though, as you're holding it up, I must say. That's a
I
Tommy
know.
Lee Edwards, too.
I
That one
love
is just...
I love this cover. I just like this one's close second, I think, out of all of them for me.
Sure.
But I just love that one where it's the old verse, the old and new coming together. I just love that. But the simplicity of the logo doesn't bother me. It bothered some people.
Did it? I didn't hear...
It wasn't as prevalent as some of the other things people had issues with. But some people were like, oh, it doesn't look like the M.A.S.K logo. Oh, yeah, it does. It's just trimmed down. And M.A.S.K actually released things with that almost trimmed down exactly like this.
Yep.
It wasn't their toy line. It was a lot of the, the party favors or the.
Sure, the merch.
Yeah, it was like, and it's probably for the exact same reason you just brought up. It doesn't really fit here. We need to trim it down a little bit. So.
Yeah, I think the big yellow lettering, even without the Ultra Flash mask at the bottom, the big yellow lettering at the bottom alone, just the word M.A.S.K in that bright yellow, strong serif font is relatively recognizable without any artistic visuals, if that's
Oh, it is.
How you know.
Here, look. Ready? Hold on. Let's see if I can do this backwards. There you go.
There you go. To me, that still pops to me as so much as being the M.A.S.K logo.
Hmm? One of the
And so,
questions I get the most is, "Hey, what font did they use for this?" It's all hand drawn. Um,
yep.
it's not like Lance Anderson, may he rest in peace.
Hmm.
I still wish he was with us today because there's so many more mass stories I wanted to talk to him about. But I asked him. He's like, "No, I drew it. I just drew it by hand." Um,
Yeah.
it's not like he pulled
Speaking,
out Times New Roman and punched it up. Um,
I'm not
it's
sure if you know, Bill, we actually, another 80s cartoon great passed away yesterday.
who's that?
Larry DiTio, if I'm saying his name right, but he was one of the big names on He-Man, um, and other things, but he's very famous for his work on the original He-Man and She-Ra series.
What's a shame?
And he passed away yesterday. I'm not too specific on the details. He was, I guess, sick for a little while, so very sad to have that happen. But yeah, some of these people who they were working 35 years ago, unfortunately are getting older, and
As are we.
it's sad. Yeah, well, that's true.
But their legacies are intact, and I just hope that I hope they, whoever, whether you worked on Mask, whether you worked on He-Man, whether you worked on, I don't know, something lame, but you worked on it. Like, I don't know, Rainbow Bright. It was never something for me, but it was big. You worked on that, and that was a labor of love. And obviously at the time you're in the industry and you're trying to make money to make ends meet, to support your family, but little did you know that what you're working on would would shape the minds of our generation as much as it has. I'm 36. We're shooting this right now. It's March 17th. I'll be 37 in a month, and I my fondest memories are of these pieces of plastic and those cartoons when I would watch with my family or I would play with my brother or my cousins. Um, it the legacies will last, and I really hope that the people that do work on them, and I know Doug's very appreciative of it. We've had the honor of talking to him a few times.
Hmm.
It, they know what it means, and they're not they're not like ogres about it where they did something and then they disappear forever. Um,
Sure. Yeah. I mean, some of the people have moved on from the voice acting and the creative world, but yeah, the people who were involved in the original Mass seem to be uh, always very
very.
pleased to hear that it was something that had such a strong impact on people. It's very nice to have that. Whereas I don't know, some of the other franchises out there maybe don't have that impact. Maybe they got too big for themselves to be able to remember that. Sometimes I feel like,
Maybe that could be the case. Um,
yeah.
but like not to go too far off. Um, but like, so I remember when Lance reached out to me wanting to talk Mask when I was running the website off of like I was joke around with Jason and Wyatt. I was like, was running on GeoCities. Like, I don't even
Oh
know
man,
what
yeah.
that is. But he reached out to me and just getting that wealth of knowledge. And then it kind of gave me the idea of, well, what about the other people that worked on this show? And I don't have video interviews or chat sessions with them, but I have text. Aside from Doug right now, and I've done a few with him. But there's a whole thing on the website just for interviews of Brendan McCain and Sharon Noble, who are married. Like
Yeah.
Vanessa and Miles Mann were married. Um,
Yep.
I was able to get a hold of Brendan Thicke through Alan Thicke's agent, because he's a real estate agent. He's not even in the business anymore. It's
Yeah. Although his brother's very much a celebrity.
what's his
His
brother's name?
his brother is the singer Robin Thicke.
Okay, okay. Unless he was in a '80s sitcom or a cartoon, I don't know. um, but yeah, it's just funny, like and I did that charity auction a couple years ago, um, and the cast all signed pictures and brought them, sent them back, and we auctioned them off and gave the money to the Red
Sure.
Cross. Like they didn't have to do that. They took the time out, uh, and the one thing too, if you're running a con, the mask, the original cast is willing to do a con. They just need to, they need to get, somebody needs to get it together. I don't
Yeah.
have the backing to do it. Otherwise, I would just invite them over to my house here and we can just hang out. But uh, it's they're willing to do it, and that was a few years ago, and I'm sure it's still the same sentiment. So
Yeah.
for what it's worth, but
And there, Doug, when he's not doing voice acting, is heavily involved in animal outreach. Like he's kind of just a good guy during the day. It's not a pose.
mhm.
He doesn't just act nice in front of the cameras. Like that's his life, is that he does voice acting and voice production and stuff. And then he also does animal outreach. He's a cool guy that way. And that's really nice to see after the fact. We're so far off the comic topic at this point, but yeah,
Well, I can cycle it
whatever.
back to also nice things too. Um, so I was able to get a hold of Tony Vargas, who did a lot of the illustrations for, I think, the first 6 comics.
3, 4?
I forget exactly how many, but I said, "Hey,
Yeah.
Tony, I would love it if you have the time." I was like, "Would you be able to do like a custom piece for my banner?" Like 3 days later, he's like, "Here you go." I was like, "Whoa, whoa!" Like, and just talk about
Yeah.
good people. Brandon was always willing to talk Mask if you wanted to. I didn't really have much
Yep.
of a conversation with anybody else, but they're all good people, and they want to tell a story and make a good product, and obviously it has to make
Sure.
money. Um, to
Yeah, I
keep
was
going.
lucky enough to talk to most of those guys as well. They were all really excited that people wanted to talk to them about their artistic work and their creations. And that's really nice to see. None of them were like, "Oh yeah, I don't really care about this. I'm just drawing it for the paycheck." No one ever said, I'm just writing this script so I can, you know, I want to bang it out." Like none of them went into that world just for the money. They all cared about what they were doing. So that was really a nice echo of the past. I mean, obviously, we have all got our jobs and we need to put food on the table, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you can also care about your product or care about your job and stuff, I think it shows through. And I thought it did in these comics. Whether or not people loved the choices that might have been made, whether or not they sold enough copies to sustain them, I think there was a lot of effort and a genuine attempt to put out something that was the best they could do. So,
I mean, obviously, the biggest problem here, Eric, is that we weren't involved in the project. Um, no, kidding. Um, no, no, you're right. And whether so, we had the comic, we had Revolution, we had the comic, we had the annual, we had the San Diego Comic Con figure come out of it, out of that set of the Revolution series set, and then
yeah,
we, Hasbro was announced the movie with F. Gary Gray as the director. So,
yeah,
you know, all we can do right now is sit and wait and hope. And, in if if the iterations of what we have seen, the very, very slow and steady progression to, not steady, but slow.
Slow for sure.
Yeah, if that progression gets us to where you want to see something come out, where I want to see it, Agents of M.A.S.K. and every other M.A.S.K. website and every other fan of M.A.S.K., not even just fans of M.A.S.K., but fans of nostalgia in general, I think we're going to get there. It's just a matter of time. Um, and I just can't wait to see it. One thing I will point out is that the Toys That Made Us needs to do a M.A.S.K. episode.
I'd love to see that. Yeah.
I've asked, quote unquote. I don't know if it's considered bothering or asking now, but
Yeah.
I've asked a few times, and I've had some dialogue, but I never really got a straight answer. So, maybe we'll see something. Maybe they'll do a generic Kenner episode. Maybe they'll mention M.A.S.K. or something like that.
Yeah, it's being realistic about things. It might
Nope,
be
no
hard to get an
realistic.
entire.
No, don't do it. Don't do it.
All right, but as you said, we might get a Kenner episode that might have 3 or 4 toy lines, and M.A.S.K. could get a chunk of that time.
Yeah.
I think that's a more realistic option that might come out.
Yeah.
A whole episode I would love, but I don't know if it's going to happen.
Oh, I brought up in a past episode that, hey, maybe we as the fans need to do something. We're all getting older, and we've been waiting pretty patiently. So maybe it's time for us to do something. We had some very creative people at IDW try, and they put out a good product, but it didn't last as long as we would have hoped. So maybe it's time for us to do a documentary or try to do a low budget movie or something like that. But I don't. That's a whole other thing. And I would tie in a lot of what they did here, to be honest. So
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if you have any other points you want to get to, but we can wrap up here.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I will say is that sometimes when things get announced, you get a lot of boohooers who are, talking about doomsday, like a new, if it's not true to the source or the original or as they perceive it, it's going to be terrible.
Mm.
I think the thing that's important to remember is that you could put out the worst movie tomorrow about the worst M.A.S.K. movie ever made tomorrow, and it could happen. It could be a total stinking turd. It doesn't make the episodes from 30 years ago, your toys and your memories from 30 years ago go away. I think people seem to think that these reimaginings and stuff somehow invalidate their original version, and that's not it. It's just more from the toy box that you can pull from. And if that's not the toy you want to take out, you can just leave it in the box for somebody else.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world. It's in fact, it's better that there's more options out there.
I agree with that. That's a very good sentiment, Eric. Yeah, I mean, I'm just hopeful that we'll get something soon. But if this is the last iteration of M.A.S.K. that we get in our lifetime, I'm happy with it. I just wish it was a different medium. That's just me. And it's not saying I'm unhappy or not grateful of a comic, but it doesn't translate as well. But
Sure.
with that being said, I appreciate you jumping on for a little bit.
My pleasure.
I don't even know what time it is now, but yeah, we'll wrap it up here. For Eric of BoulderHill.net, this is Bill from Matt-Trakker.com, and I guess we'll talk to you later.